conversation. We're going to talk about the Buckeyes. It's a big week because they're probably going to name a new starting punter. And Brad Robinson is here to talk about special teams. Welcome back to Brad. Justin Zwick over here. Bill Landis on my left. I am Austin Ward. 2 weeks into camp, boys. Think this team's going to be any good, Brad?
I think so.
Okay.
I've liked what I've heard from the players. I've actually spent more time listening to what guys say after practice. Denzel's actually been my favorite person to hear talk because I've gotten to watch him go from the freshman that didn't speak words at all to now a true leader and face of the Buckeyes, and it's been cool to see that transition.
What's he saying that's caught your ear? You mean I know the brotherhood and the secrecy in there, but he does have a way about him that you're getting the real stuff.
It's been interesting to hear his perspective on the offense, specifically the quarterbacks. I think he's honestly one of the most trustworthy voices I take because since he does not talk a lot, when he does say an observation, I feel like it's not it's basically this is what it is. It's cut and dry. So I guess I take a lot from what he says, and I think it's important that he's making the comments he is.
I think the growth of his comments from spring, I mean, that's what caught me, right? Because in the spring, he's like, I need to see more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now...
And even last month, he said, we haven't seen anything since then. I would like to see more.
So it's now you're like, I'm seeing some stuff. And, and that's coming from a defensive back who sees these guys every day, going against these receivers and these quarterbacks. So that, I'm doing the same type of thing, listening to these guys speak. That made me feel better because he's a guy who will tell you the truth. And, last spring was like, okay. I don't love hearing that out of him. But now I do love hearing this 2 weeks into camp that will come, he came into camp. He looks like he did lose some weight. Mm-hmm. Looks like he's in much better shape. He talked about working on some mechanics, getting deep ball throws maybe a little bit better. Just the things he worked on throughout the summer, I think, has propelled him into having, somewhat of a good camp so far this year, which I imagine Ryan's got to name a starter soon. I hope he does. But, I think it's going to be Will Howard and from, just everything else. But then you hear Denzel saying that, all right, I think he's got it kind of figured out and has a little bit more comfortability in the offense and in practices and all that kind of stuff.
Denzel did pick off Will Howard on Thursday, and then the next day was that's the only time he's turned it over, and it's been pretty good. So it felt like Bill on that same Thursday that without actually naming Will Howard the starter, that Ryan Day was walking up to that line and ready to do so pretty soon.
Yeah, we've seen him do that before with C.J. Stroud. I think it will happen this week. We talked to Ryan Day on Thursday. I don't imagine we'll hear before then. I guess they could put out a press release or tweet it or something. They've never really handled their business that way before, but I think if we don't hear anything until Thursday, we will hear that from Ryan Day on Thursday. I'll be surprised if we don't, and it's a combination of what we've seen from Will in practice. I think it's clear that he's the number one guy, and it wasn't just Denzel kind of singing Will's praises last week. It was the receivers too, which I put more stock into what Denzel says because, like Brad said,
the receivers want to keep him happy. They want the ball.
You can't talk mess about the other quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Denzel just chooses his words carefully. I don't think he's going to waste them on BS, right? So
he ain't come back for no BS.
That's right. But even Emeka Egbuka said you can sense Will Howard is much more comfortable in command of the offense. Jeremiah Smith said that he likes that Will plays with a little bit of a confidence and a swagger, and will talk a little bit when he's out there. And I think there's something about that helps kind of rally the offense around him. So none of it's surprising, right? We all thought this was going to be the end result, and if and when Ryan Day does name him the starter this week, that will be earlier than he's done it in the past, which I thought was going to be the case too. So it's all trending in that direction. I think we just have to wait a few more days, unfortunately.
Brad, have you got the sense that not just that Ohio State is maybe about to name Will Howard the starting quarterback, but that there is more confidence about this entire unit? Because I felt like when you watch the five practices we've seen and all five quarterbacks, it feels like all of them have some of those extraordinary traits that Ryan Day is looking for at a quarterback. Now, they're not all the same. They're maybe not all as refined at this point, but it just feels like the confidence overall in that group is very different than a year ago.
I think it's years ahead of just what last year was, and I think at the end of the day, having Will Howard with his experience is kind of a no-brainer. At least those first couple games when they're not challenging games, you just put him out there, and he has the year's experience. He's also seems to be the one performing well. You also don't hear much bad about Devin. You hear Devin still having a good camp, and one thing I know from being on a team with Devin, and one thing I know from talking to guys is everyone loves Devin. Devin's a great guy. He's a great person to have in the locker room, and also I still think he is getting better. It's just Will's an older guy. He's got more experience. but having Devin also get better and be another option, it's a long season this year. The new playoffs is up. Anything can happen. Like guys get tired, guys get worn out, injuries, knock on what happened. Like you need that room with depth where like last year we kind of went in, we're like, let's just hope nothing happens to anybody. Where now that you have a deeper unit, even all the way down the list of 5 guys, I think are further along than we've had in years, especially because the new age of football with the transferring. Like I think this is the deepest quarterback room we've probably had, at least since my time as a Buckeye.
Definitely.
It's deep, but it's still relatively young, though, right? I mean, as far as experience goes,
After Will Howard.
yeah, after Will
And
Howard,
even
which
if you want to include him in there, he's not played a game.
yeah, not at Ohio State, but he still has that experience of playing 4 years somewhere else. Which I think leads to that room being a little more, whatever, however you want to put
Solid.
that. Yeah, solid. Just because you do have the vet guy. If you don't have that vet guy, you're like, all right, well, Devin's been here for a few years, but was hurt a little bit last year, didn't get much playing time. Then you just have a bunch of young guys. So I think that veteran guy, which is what they intended to do in the offseason, is go out and get somebody like that. But I think he kind of calms that down a little bit. But to your point, I mean, a lot of games this year possibly could be played. We saw last year when Kyle had the ankle. Would Devin have come in if his ankle would have been healthy? Would we have seen something like that? So it's a long season, stuff happens. But, I think having that veteran on top for the younger guys, one, to learn how he works and how he does his stuff, even though they've learned, from Kyle last year maybe, being freshman. But just seeing how he works and how he goes about his business is going to help them studying film and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they haven't seen that before. And a 4-year guy comes in and shows how he does it, and maybe they pick some stuff up there.
Jay-Z, we've been getting this question a lot, which is how should you manage those reps from here on out? If it is true that this week Ohio State is going to have a starting quarterback and they get ready for the season, and Brad mentioned the first 3 games before you dive into a road trip with Michigan State and things maybe get a little more difficult with Iowa and then ramping up towards Oregon. What would you do? How should you, what's the best way to manage these reps? Because all 5 of them are not going to be able to continue to get a ton of reps or many reps at all. What's the balance between Will Howard needs a lot of game reps with a bunch of new people?
Well, I mean, you want to. I would want my starter, if I'm going to name him, he's getting all the 1 reps. I'm keeping everybody together, offensive line wise, receiver wise, just showing him this is going to be your unit when you're on the field. Let's start, getting that cohesiveness together, and just kind of feeling everybody out and just seeing how things go and just learning and not splitting everybody up. I would go about that way. I mean, back in our day, if you had 2 freshmen on the team, they're splitting,
scout team
duties. Now Julian loses his black stripe, faster than any other quarterback. So maybe he is more on the 1s and 2s side working in there. I don't know how those last 3 guys really shake out as far as reps goes or where they go. But I mean, I think you give Will as many 1 reps as you can. Devin, let him run with those 2s. Maybe you're working Julian in with him a little bit just to continue to give him some reps with, guys that could possibly be playing. And then from there, you got the scout team. You got to have somebody run it, and you get good experience over there. You're going against great defense. I mean, I remember my freshman year, we had Doss and all those cats, and it was tough. But you felt good when you were making plays against them, even though you weren't supposed to. And you get yelled at by the coaches for making those plays because you didn't throw it to the guy on the card.
Got some PTSD.
Yeah, 100%. But it's still good. It's still good experience, and you're still getting reps, and you're going against the 1D, so it's you're getting a lot of good stuff over there as well.
When you're on scout team, I've always wondered this. Like if you're scout team offense, how much are you actually just like allowed to play football off of instinct, and how much are you directed to do this specific thing?
As a scout team offensive player, my freshman year at Ohio State, since I was ineligible as a transfer and stuff. The ultimate blocking tight end was my role, aka go in and get knocked around pretty hard. But it was like, hey, here's the line on the sheet you need to follow. Don't go off it. Then once you get into the season, like our perfect Thursdays was the thing under Coach Meyer. There is, as the offensive scout guy, you're like, run this line and you better do it right because this is we're getting ready for the game. Don't be a hero right now. The defense is working on stuff. So it was very much not a ton of freedom to go, but maybe it's different at the quarterback spot because you can do things differently.
And not so much. I remember, because you see the plays, you're running the plays for what they want to see, and well, you took that away, coach. So I went over here and no,
Throw the
that is not what they're going to do. Yeah, you let Mike intercept that ball. Okay,
We don't care about your confidence, JZ.
Exactly.
We want Mike Doss.
This is all about the defense, which it is, but it's like, all right, well, a good quarterback's going to maybe see that and go do something else. But there was a lot of that with Dino. But then he'd always give you that little smirk after he chewed you out because, all right, you're being a quarterback, but we need you to follow along here and give our guys the look that we want them to see.
Bill, did you think that the way the reps were handled on Thursday is a precursor of what's to come, or are we just going to read too much into it like we always do?
I mean, it pertains to Will, yeah, for sure. I think it does get interesting with Lincoln and Julian and who's going to be 3 and how you divvy those up. I don't even, like, in a normal practice in the season, how many even, like, third-team reps are there? I can't imagine there are very many. So you have, like, 3 quarterbacks just kind of standing around when the 1s and 2s are going. I don't know if that's really beneficial to anybody. So that's probably a question worth asking Ryan Day once we get past the point of naming the starters. Like, you still have 5, right? Like, you have to find work for all of these guys. And it sounds like maybe something more than scout team if scout team's not actually helping develop you within your own offense. So it's not a like issue that I'm worried about. It's just a complication that comes when the room is as deep and talented as it is right now. And that's the thing with the room. It's like you talk about depth. Like what you can kind of pick through that and say, like, well, no one's played. But it's like there are 5 guys in that room who think they can be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. That I don't think has ever happened here. So that's what you have to manage now. Like the egos of that one thing, yes, but also the development of that and making sure that those guys are actually on the path to perhaps one day start. Obviously, there's a pecking order that will establish itself. Guys will fall out of that race. Not all of them are going to eventually be starters here, but I think you have to act like they are now, and that can be a little challenging at times, I'd imagine.
I think that's the part that's fascinating to me is, like, at what point, or is there a point where if you're Ryan Day and this team and it's natty or bust, you have to, like, can you turn off that part of your brain that's like, well, I'd like to start thinking about 2025 and 2026 and what's beyond. Like, those are the decisions that have to be made, I think, to get Will Howard and Devin Brown ready just in case something happens, because this team's only going to get one shot to be the most talented team in the country and go accomplish all these goals.
Well, in the spirit of looking ahead, I'll think like past practice. Like, if you look at last season, we didn't blow out teams at the beginning of the year like we normally do. So we had no young guy reps in that. Like, my early years then in probably 2019 was the biggest one because that's when I was a backup, but I got a lot of playing time throughout the year because we were just dominating teams. Where at the point where the entire second half, like, I got put in for a second half. Like, at halftime, I told, like, hey, you're going in as, like, a long snapper. Like, that's how badly we were destroying teams. And we didn't have that at all last year because offensively we weren't putting up the points. Usually the defense was there. But I think those first 3-4 games, whatever it is, like, ideally the starters are hopefully out early and we have at least an entire fourth quarter of those 2s and those 3s. And that's when you can get, like, 2 young quarterbacks in, alternating series in the fourth quarter. And I think that's important because we didn't have it last year. Right. And it's not just important for the future years. It's important for the length of the season, as we talked about already. It's a long season. Those young guys are going to have to play at some point, at some time. Even if it's just one play they got to sub in. I think those first 3 games are crucial. You do need to dominate teams so you can get those young guys experience.
Yeah, there is that, but there's also, you got a new quarterback. So you don't want to, if the offense is moving along smoothly, great. But, last year we talked about, you had 2 guys who had never started before, and the guy who you went with, it didn't look so good, so you wanted more reps for him in a way because he was still pretty young and fresh as a starter. But, if Will comes out and that offense is rolling like it should be, 100%. You can get those guys, young guys in. Back in the day, you couldn't play at all as a freshman or, if you were redshirting or this or that. Now you get so many games that you can kind of get in there and just let them get some burn.
That is a good luxury with you. I actually hadn't thought of that dynamic. Like, Will Howard does not need to play in the second half of the blowout, right? He's already played enough football. So I'm hoping that we'll get that is like one of a criticism I think of Ryan Day a little bit is that maybe he doesn't always embrace those opportunities to play those young guys, and I think it's because he wanted to keep playing the quarterback because the quarterbacks are always kind of inexperienced. So if he doesn't feel that urge now, maybe that allows like everyone who's young to play a little more.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting to me is like, will there be part of his brain that's like, we've just barely seen him throw to Ohio State's players or in this offense. Like I want him to get comfortable. They're going to Oregon in 5 weeks. Like,
he's throwing the ball 10 times in this game. Is that enough? Do we want him to get more because we do have these big games coming up down the road where he's going to maybe throw it 30 times or whatever else.
Versus the other part of his brain that's going to be like, ooh, the Cotton Bowl was a pretty rough experience. Maybe it is time to like let the backup throw some more passes because again he hasn't done that, and we can be critical of that or point it out or however you want to view it. Like he's a pretty good quarterback developer, and maybe Chip Kelly will be like, we also saw these things during training camp and 4 years worth of experience at Kansas State. Like maybe it'll be okay. We don't know. We're gonna have to see what those answers come in.
Well, and it might be another thing of these guys maybe aren't getting reps like we want them to in practice. Second half of these games might be a chance for them to get some reps running our offense or, being out there with, an offensive unit. So, I mean, he's been thinking about that a lot, I imagine, coming in. I mean, you think when Julian jumps on board, if that didn't happen, then it's not really an issue, right?
Yeah.
You have your two guys up top. Yep. You have Lincoln in the middle, maybe going back and forth, and you have Eric running scout team. So that fifth one kind of throws that wrinkle like, ooh, okay, we have maybe one more than we expected or, would love to have, although you want great quarterbacks. But I'm sure they've been thinking about that, and it's a tough deal to divvy those reps out.
And Air has been he spoke last Tuesday and was like, this is a development. He didn't maybe say it in those exact words, but he's like, I'm focusing on myself and getting better. I don't think that Aaron Nolan is going to be counting reps or concerned about what the pecking order is ahead of him this year. I think he's in a true freshman year.
Yeah, and he might actually find it a little better once the season starts and those scout team reps do become more available because now there are times where it's like, man, Air hasn't done anything.
He didn't get to do much during practice.
In a couple periods here. So I think that would be beneficial to him too. But you're right. He seems to have a pretty good perspective on it. And he's gotten better too. Like I think he's been much better from what we've seen in practice in the summer than what we saw in the spring. Maybe he's just building off of that solid spring game. But I think he's in an okay spot. He's in a better spot than I maybe imagined him or envisioned him being in after spring ball.
So 2 weeks into camp, who is someone you have seen or someone you have heard about that you weren't really expecting that might play some sort of meaningful role? Brad, who's the first person that comes to mind or is coming up?
David Adolph.
Ooh, okay. You're going. We're going to the walk-ons right away.
No, not a walk-in anymore.
Well, okay.
I'm a personal fan.
Because Ryan Day wouldn't tell us who got promoted.
That's always been the thing. Side note, Ohio State is we just don't announce scholarships. Yeah. I was on scholarship for like 3.5 years. No one knew. But David is day one as a walk-on. He came in, and you're like, all right, this kid works hard. And then he started doing he had good moments on scout team. Like I personally walk-on brotherhood. Yeah. I love cheering for the walk-ons in scout period and just normal period. But David was a guy who's like throwing up with the CJ Saunders, like immediately like was performing well. Sam Wiggles, like those guys. And I saw like the tweet last week, like that someone posted out that like he got, and I was like, it's so deserving. So I think obviously he's continued to excel and had a great camp. And I think there's no one more deserving right now, and super excited about that. And obviously he played on special teams a lot last year too, and I think that will be really helpful moving forward. It's just some veteran depth.
The way that Ohio State continues to bring in like walk-on wide receivers who can play, maybe not everywhere, but at least at the MAC level or bottom of the Big Ten, or get action late in games for Ohio State is pretty wild.
Yeah, I think Sam Wiggs had 1 or 2 catches yesterday in a preseason game for the Rams. Obviously, he played here and then was at Ohio for a couple of seasons, did really well. But
we had that Saunders kid a couple years ago too, right? He was a walk-on, right?
Till the injuries wiped him out, but he still had opportunities with Carolina for a couple years. So they just keep doing that. It's remarkable what that wide receiver room has done.
You get those good guys. I mean, guys who just want to be a part of it. And they will bust their tail to get on that special team. Like those are the kind of guys that you love having around. One, because the guys on scholarship see how hard they work, and like, I gotta step my game up because these guys are going, hardcore, and they're doing anything that the team needs them to do.
Who's our other guy, Bill? Dorian Williams.
Dorian Williams, yeah. Can't remember where he's from.
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati Princeton.
Yeah, I think Princeton.
Kid? Yeah, had FBS offers. Was committed to Vanderbilt, I think, at a time, and he's.
That's wild.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah,
man.
I don't need that scholarship.
You watch him out there. You're just like, oh yeah, that's a scholarship guy at Ohio State, right? It's like, no, he chose to come here for free.
Same with, Xavier Johnson. Like,
exactly.
Look at his career and stuff. Like, there's always like each class has 1 or 2 guys that you can go back. I mean, Pat Gird's another guy who has played a lot of football. Rossi, obviously. It's just continually. There's always 1 or 2 guys that really contributes. But then no one sees the effect those guys. Because those guys aren't just good players on the field. It's like they're the most respected guys in the locker room. I think that's what the outside doesn't see. Is like they're not just like guys that decided to walk on that can play. It's like they're also some of the hardest workers and most respected and loved guys in the locker room by coaches and players.
Inky Jones too on defense.
That's right.
Worth mentioning. Yeah.
Loved watching him in the spring. Jay-Z, you smirked too.
Well, I just I feel much better. Heard something interesting.
Oh, okay.
Well, not really. I was watching Chip Kelly talk.
Okay.
And, I've been worried about the offensive line, but I'm not anymore.
You have?
I'm not anymore because we got 3 NFL caliber offensive linemen, right now on the squad there. So we just got, we got the center coming from Alabama, so we're good. I am not worried about the offensive line anymore.
Well, whenever they're healthy.
Well,
Depth.
fair.
Do you want to bring up depth? Or?
Well, that I don't want to talk about that. I'm talking starters here. We're going to have a nice starting offensive line based off what I heard Chip say.
Okay.
Which surprised me. But he didn't say who's going to be that right guard yet, but they're still working
Got to figure that out.
Yeah, they're still working that out, but the guys around him, I feel much better after hearing Chip talk.
I think they really wanted to wrap up that battle, just simply couldn't last week because of illness. And Carson
Funky
Hinton,
illness.
Yeah, not one that you expect a group of college athletes to be dealing with in training camp, but that's the situation that they were faced with, and they're doing their best to manage that, flush that out.
Yeah, I mean, we still got a few weeks.
Yeah, no, but I think they wanted to figure that out for some of the reasons that we always talk about with chemistry and cohesiveness
100%.
and familiarity, and
Especially if you're working on a quarterback battle. You should probably figure out who the center is first.
that helps. But I think Seth McLaughlin will be the center. I think more likely than not, Tegra Tshabola is going to win that job at guard. But the way that they've talked about Carson Hinsman's offseason and an Iron Buckeye tribute, I think they really wanted him to not be missing at least 2 of the first week of practice.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I guess there's 2 scrimmages left, right, before the game. So that's an opportunity for Carson to make a move there. I think unfortunately we have seen a lot of practice, but within those practices we've not seen a lot of really anything that can tell us how they're going about their business at right guard relative to Tegra and Carson. It does seem like maybe if Luke Montgomery had a small percentage chance of being in it, maybe he's not quite in it. He's doing a lot of center stuff from what we've seen. So it does feel like a 2-man race. And, I would say Tegra now, too, just based off what we've seen.
Well, and the spring game, I felt when Tegra was in there playing guard. I mean, they looked, better than I thought they did other, times throughout the day.
Yeah,
so,
I'm
he's big dude, right?
He's a dude.
He's like 6'7"?
Him and Fryer, on the right side of the line, just kind of collapsing that.
Yeah, it just seems like.
But the same thing that Jay-Z's talking about, putting Josh Simmons next to Donovan Jackson is also pretty intimidating and athletic. Like that's.
I think the 5 are going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
I think if Carson's not that guy, you then have a guy who's your 6th man that can play
100%,
3 of the positions that played 12 games last year.
Definitely.
How
And I
big
think
is that to have? Yeah.
that's a lot better than most. Like I think most teams would take that in a heartbeat.
100%.
Yep.
Someone who surprised you, Bill?
I want to say Arvell Reese, but we've already talked about him a lot on Mondays Daily. But I'm just trying to rack my brain for guys who might do a little more than perhaps I was anticipating, and he's the one that keeps leaping to mind for me because I just thought this was going to be another year of development for him, and maybe he'd be one of those young guys who can get on the field when games get out of hand, and it just seems more and more like he's going to play. I'm not saying he's going to supplant Cody Simon as a starting Mike, but I also don't think you want to play Cody Simon 900 snaps this year, right? Like we've said that a lot about a lot of guys. So I think Arvell Reese is going to be the beneficiary of wanting to keep Cody Simon fresh for the whole year, and that is certainly not a role that I was anticipating for him.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be a Mike linebacker at all, actually.
No, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of things about Arvell that are surprising. Verb had a picture of Arvell. I was looking through the gallery, and I might have used it in a story. It's out of focus bodies in the foreground, and then in the very middle, it's just Arvell staring through your soul. Good God, if I was
a beast.
I was a quarterback and I saw that. No thanks.
And that's how I felt about the Davison Igbinosin photo that I used in my story last week. There's some stone cold assassins on this team that you
got that shankability, right?
you got to have that, and Davison will let you know, and he would also let you know that the best thing you can do on a Tuesday, Jay-Z, is
and the best thing you could do on a Tuesday, and the best way to eat mac and cheese is when it's deep fried.
Yeah,
and you can pick it up with your hand, and you can dip it in spicy ranch or sour cream, which it comes with at the store.
You go with some spicy ranch for your mac and cheese bites, Jay-Z?
You can put spicy ranch on anything, brother.
Okay,
That is the way to go. So you get yourself some spicy ranch. You come in, get some of these. My daughter is going to be so excited. I get to take these home to her today.
It is great when you get a sneak peek of Appetizer 3's Day.
100%.
$3 at your local Rooster on Tuesday. Don't forget to register now for the Buckeye giveaway Roosters bowl trip. It's not a bowl trip anyway. What is it? Just the Buckeye giveaway.
It's a giveaway.
There's this QR code that's over here I'm staring at, but it's also somewhere, I don't know, on the screen somewhere. And register for that. Update.
How many? 4? Is it up to 4?
It's up to 4 million entrants already. So you want to get in on that. Nicole is not here to tell me that I'm lying.
To tell you that you're wrong.
So for now, it'll stand until she gets back
That's
in here
right.
next week and says that I should stop inflating the totals. But we are going to take a break in here. We're going to bring Berm in for a little bit of update and some optimism when we roll along in here at Roosters, a fun, casual joint.
Roosters has been so fortunate. We just want to be able to give some of that back to the community.
They donate to organizations that are near and dear to their heart, and we're so fortunate to have been with Roosters now for a long time.
They always go above and beyond to help support our foundation to further help veterans.
It's just a wonderful feeling to know that Roosters supports the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer.
All the folks at Roosters are just genuinely kind folks, and they want to make a difference.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
Thank you, Roosters.
Thank you, Roosters.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
Welcome back in to the Henderson Horseshoe Lounge. Berm is here. And
Optimism.
He's got
I've been here the whole time.
he's got a smile.
I do.
He's just feeling himself, feeling confident.
Why though?
I don't know.
He's
why.
wearing the J's.
I mean, it's
Just
Monday.
Probably because you had a weekend at home that
J
wasn't
Monday.
not in the guest room.
Yeah, it's nice to be home for the weekend. Beautiful weather. Got to take the top off the Jeep for the weekend and enjoy, being a normal human.
Do you have a bunch of ducks in your Jeep?
I have 6 ducks in my
Is
Jeep.
that, what is that?
I don't know, but I know that I'm supposed to do it.
I'm just supposed to.
He loves it also when there's Jeeps coming the other direction.
Do you grab the whole
Throws
things
up-
and honk a
the jag.
duck at each other?
The girls force me to have some ducks. I've set a limit. So, the ducks represent everyone in our family.
Okay.
And then there's no more ducks.
So instead of the decal on the back window, you just put the ducks in for the family.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, they like it. They like to put ducks on other people's Jeeps. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a thing.
But whatever. I'm in Toledo. It's like the home of the Jeep. So,
it is?
Is it?
Who said that?
It's literally where they're built.
All of them?
All of them, yeah.
Really?
I didn't know that.
I mean, I know there's a plant as I drive by.
Yeah, that's the Jeep plant.
I didn't know it was the Jeep plant. Yeah,
Yeah, it's the one.
So you get a good deal up there. There's a lot.
No.
No.
You pay just as much. You pay just as much as anyone else.
That's
But
unfortunate.
That was fine. Good weekend. Got to go to a Mud Hens game on Sunday. That was nice. Beautiful weather. Fun game to watch.
Yeah.
But other than that, we start Monday. Rivals.com released their new rankings for the 2025 class. Their new 5 stars, 5 Ohio State players, 5 Ohio State commitments in the top 25 in the country, which pretty good, including new number 1 overall, Tavien St. Clair, the quarterback from Bellefontaine. So
New number 1 overall.
number 1
right?
overall.
Didn't you predict that was going to happen?
I'm not going to say I predicted it. I thought it could because I think he's got every single tool that you could ask for a quarterback to have. And it made me think about your recruitment, Jay-Z. And obviously the world is significantly different now than it was in 2002 with the internet and all that stuff. But, I don't know that you were ranked number 1 in the country at any point, but you were in those conversations. How hard is it for a high school athlete to deal with not just the pressures that come with that, but with the expectations that come with that, and what people you become a celebrity. I mean, you ended up going to Massillon, obviously leaving Orville, which is probably apples to apples, kind of with Bellefontaine.
Yeah, probably.
So, how crazy was it growing up when everyone knew who you were as a high school junior?
Oh, it was interesting. I mean, again, we didn't have all this, so it was more paper and stuff like that. And I don't know that I was that popular because I didn't do a lot of camps. I got to go to Elite 11, but I didn't do any.
Well, there weren't that many then.
Well, there weren't, but they were still they started that regional, Elite 11 stuff. There just weren't as many of them, and I didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I was just working with my coach in Massillon. He was the quarterback guy, and that's what I did. But it was cool. I mean, going to Massillon, I went from we were D4, then D3, and then I went to D1. So that first game, I remember when we played Buckeyes, and not a great program, but not a terrible program, and it was my first Division I game.
They put out,
and
college players.
they had players on the team at that point. I think and Antonio Pittman was a freshman maybe, and they had another guy who was a pretty good player. But I remember just going to that game like, well, you did this. Everybody's expecting you to be really good.
Yeah.
You're going D1 now. I mean, and then I think I threw 5 touchdowns that first game. But it was just a lot going into it. But it was a lot of fun. I put a lot of pressure on myself when I transferred, just because I had one city that hated me and wanted me to fail, and I had another one that embraced me and was like really excited about it, and I didn't want to let them down, and I wanted to prove to them that I made the right decision. So, a lot of that goes into it, but it would be way different nowadays. I mean, it would be nuts.
It sounds different. Like Jeremiah Smith was talking about this on Friday. Ohio State fans showing up to see his high school games, or 7-on-7 performances.
Well, Stan White, who was in my class from Maryland,
Baltimore.
Him and his dad came to a couple of my games just to check it out, whatever. And we had a couple of different guys like that show up, just because it was the big show back then. Like we were throwing the ball around. It was the air raid. Like it was fun, exciting. I mean, so I had some guys show up like that, and it's like, this is kind of crazy. We got guys who I'm actively trying to recruit because I was calling people around it, at that point in time, my senior year, trying to fill out that class, and they're showing up to games and wanting to watch me play. So it was pretty cool, and it is wild because Ohio State fans are everywhere, and they get after it. If they know there's a player they want, they show up, and they do that.
I think now what makes it so interesting that Jeremiah is obviously a pretty exceptional case. Like he was the number one player in the country and a player that anybody who's ever seen him knows like he's an NFL player. He's going to be in the NFL in 2.5 years from now. And so when you get a chance to see him as a high school player, you're like, I got to go see him because you may never get
2.5 years.
Yeah, whatever. How many times have we talked about my math skills?
You're gonna leave after this year if you could.
Jeremiah Smith is going to be an NFL player. Like as a wide receiver, it's pretty easy to say unless he suffers some catastrophic injuries, he's going to be an NFL player. It's not the same for quarterbacks. No. Doesn't matter how good you are in high school. But I think about a guy like Tavien, who has had high schools from all over the country trying to recruit him from Bellefontaine, high schools from all over Ohio trying to recruit him from Bellefontaine. It says something, and this is not to, your situation was different because you had to make that move to prove.
Yeah, it wasn't the same. Like everybody didn't know who I was as a sophomore at Oroville.
Right. So now everyone knows who he is. He doesn't have to go somewhere else. He's already committed to Ohio State. Already had the offer. Now number one player in the country. But when you get that sort of notoriety and that sort of publicity, the chance to surround yourself and insulate yourself with people that are the same people who humbled you growing up, I think is so important. And that's why like the Tavien discussion, as we've continued to have it and have seen it evolve over the last few months, a guy like CJ Stroud, I think, turned out the way he did because nobody knew who the heck he was.
Flew in under the radar, and all of a sudden, hey, this guy's pretty good.
And so he didn't have all of the crazy hype around him for multiple years at the time. So I think that Tavien, despite the accolades and the conversation around him, is going to be a very different type of quarterback experience at Ohio State than what we saw with even Justin Fields, who quite clearly turned out pretty darn well. But even Dwayne Haskins, who was a top 50 player in the country for multiple years and had the videos of him in the Ohio State locker room when he was 7 years old saying, I can't wait to play at Ohio State. Like, I hope that people allow his development to happen naturally. And I think the best thing for him is that Julian Sayin and Aaron Oland and Lincoln Keenholz are all going to be there and maybe give him an opportunity not have to.
Yeah, it's not going to be a situation where he's stepping in and saying, we're putting everything on you here. You got to go play as a freshman. We have other people that are going to push you in.
The curse of rising and having these rankings in the publicity right now is that people are already saying, well, does this mean, Brad, that he can go compete with Julian Sayin for the starting job next year? Like,
There's no pumping the brakes.
Can we watch 2024 first?
There's no pumping the brakes on any of that.
I think this year could be pretty exciting.
Agreed. Bill brought up earlier, like a good thing with like Aaron Noland is like he's kind of taken this year to develop, and I feel like a lot of kids these days don't care about that. They want to play now. They want to go transfer. They want to do this now. So I think that shows big steps for him. But then hopefully you see the same thing with someone like Tavien, especially because you're coming in with all these guys that they're already going to be in the system for a year before you. Take that first year, develop physically in the weight room and stuff. I mean, a lot of these guys, like I see, like in Jeremiah Smith, like he was ready to go day one. So,
that's the one area Tavien will not have to.
Yeah,
he will not be behind in that sense. I mean, he's 6'4", 232. Like he's
a grown man already.
I was talking to someone at Ohio State about him last week, and he looks like an NFL quarterback. Yeah, and that sort of thing. But you're 100% correct. Like this is about resetting your expectations, recalibrating what your own path is, because you are not going to be the guy that everyone in Massillon is saying is the best player who's ever played here. You know, there hasn't been a high school player out of Tavien St. Clair's high school to go to a Big Ten program as a football player since 1968. So, like, you're talking about a place where just these guys don't exist. And so when you talk about that shift, you know, when Justin got there, you guys had a pretty good mind that he was going to be the starter. But where was the biggest adjustment from those big time quarterbacks that you saw? And you know, obviously, Justin, you were in that spot, so I'd like your perspective. What was the biggest adjustment you had to make mentally, emotionally? But Brad, from a teammate perspective, like, how do you guys help? How do you guide someone that is coming in with that sort of hype?
I mean, so Justin came in, and I think I've talked about it before on here. When he came in, he was very quiet. He just came in and put his head down and worked, and then throughout like that winter and spring into spring ball, like he slowly started having a voice because he just was earning everyone's respect. But he just came in, and from day one, he worked hard in the weight room, he did stuff like that. And then by the time like it was like more known through like end of spring and stuff, like everyone already respected him. So I think that was a very big different approach. He didn't just come in and was like, I'm the guy and this. He like that's just one, it's not him. But I think that's very important. You have to come in, you have to focus on what's going on right now, and that's your off-season workouts. Whether you come in January or whether you come in May or June, all that matters right now is those off-season workouts. I think now there's, even from when I was in there and then when you were there, like now they can have footballs and summer workouts, and there's a lot more evaluation there. But still, like, what do you do in the weight room? That's always been big to me, and like I think that's where you gain respect from a teammate. So if you come in as the freshman, and that's usually honestly where we first hear about the freshman is so-and-so's putting up numbers, they're competing later. If you come in, especially because I've seen the recent pictures of him too, like dude does look like he's built. And I think if you come in and you start that, and then he's got to use that first spring ball and that first year to adjust to the speed of the game, especially because he's coming from a high school that's smaller. Like, he can probably go out there and have an easy game because he's just that much better than everybody. But now then you're going to get into the place where everyone's good as you. Everyone's good. So I think that adjustment comes, but it helps when you earn people's respect first.
Yeah, that's 100%. You got to come in and just work and keep your mouth shut. And that's what I try to do. That summer, just showing up, working out, just being around, showing like I'm going out, I'm throwing. I had my brother out running routes for me, back in that. Just showing people like this guy. All right, we may have heard this or that about him, but he seems to just be working hard and wanting to be part of the team. I think not the biggest, but one of the things that's hard is you go from being celebrated and being the guy to I'm on scout team.
Yeah. Do you think
I've never sat. I started my freshman year at Oroville. Like I had success, and it's like, all right, you're in college, and you're not. You're gonna sit. You're gonna sit and do something that you've never done before. Because I never ran scout team. When I was in high school, and I never sat and watched another guy play, and that can be hard. Because you're not used to it. But again, you just keep your head down and realize, my chance is going to come. I got to be doing what I have to be doing, but. To his point, like it's a huge difference. I'll never forget getting behind the scout or the first team offensive line as a freshman. You had, Alex Stepanovich 330, Shane Olivier 370. Like you just had all these huge butts in front of you, like this huge mitt, and I'm just like, this is different, because even at Massillon, which is a bigger school, I was probably about the same size as my biggest offensive lineman.
Do you think that the D-recruitment process hits quarterbacks harder than it does other positions?
That the what?
Like the D-recruitment.
The humbling process.
Do you think it hits quarterbacks harder than other positions? I mean, I'd like your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just become so used to being the guy. Tavien's probably started since his freshman year. Yeah. He's had 4 years of starting of just being the man. That happened to me. And that can be, it's a different situation. You don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, this sucks. It just is the way life goes, and it's the progression of how things have to work in most cases. But it can be tough. To just know, like, we got a game this weekend. I'm doing nothing. I'm going to stand on the sidelines and cheer, and try and get mental reps and pay attention as much as I can. And even then, back on my day, it was hard to do that because we didn't know the plays at all the times because we didn't have headsets. Yeah. So Tress would tell Scotty, hey, this is the play. You would watch the signals and get to play from that. But, I mean, it's just different. It's a different mindset, and it's hard to get over because you don't ever envision yourself going somewhere and sitting, right? Like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to play. Yeah, no, there's guys who are 22 years old who have been here, who know what to do, and have been through this. And you're going to have to just take your time and sit down. I think quarterback position is probably different than other positions because they may rotate. a great receiver may come out, I just ran deep ball, I'm taking this play off, or, that sort of thing, where the quarterback, you don't ever come out of the game. So it can be hard to jump over that.
I wonder if that's different. I don't know, easier, harder, what the right way is. Like, quarterbacks do know that there's only one that's going to play at a time. I think, like, I remember specifically, like, Garrett Wilson. It's like you could see him physically, and multiple wide receivers are on the field, and Brian Hartland's like, you guys need to cool it with this stuff. When he's ready, he's ready. And, like, Garrett's going to keep trying to pushing. But, like, I think that would probably be more difficult at other positions where it's like, there's more opportunity for me.
And I'm still not.
Why am I not out there yet? And they're de-recruiting and telling them work ethic and be a complete receiver and those things.
Yeah, I mean, that would be tight. I've never been in that situation. It's always just been.
Well, long snappers, like, they come in with really
that's high expectations. You're going to be the man. You're the only guy on the team that can do it.
That's very true. Yeah, that's right. You got to put it in the window right there.
So it took him a long time.
My
Brad got over that.
My last query regarding the Tavien St. Clair phenomenon, which is, again, 16 months ago, he was not ranked on Rivals.com. Now he's
you got him to number one.
Now he's number one player in the country. I did not. I have no voice. I do not have any influence on the recruiting rankings. But he will be, when he signs in December, the first Ohio quarterback to sign with the Buckeyes since Joe Burrow, which is 10 years ago, which is insane. When you were coming up, every quarterback was from Ohio pretty much. I mean, there was Craig, obviously.
Well, you had Hoying, then you had Scotty Mack. Craig is, of course, from Michigan.
Right.
Troy and I. Beckman came after that.
The guys from Schoenhoff, all those guys from Cincinnati.
Robbie Schoenhoff from Cincinnati.
It was always Ohio. Mm-hmm. How different do you think the expectations or the perception of him will be because he's from Ohio and not from somewhere else? Like, I mean, I think Ohio State fans in general, when a kid is committed and he's from Ohio, they automatically downgrade him a little bit in their minds. Like, even though now Tavien has moved up and is now the number one player prospect in the country, I like to make sure we say that right. He's number one prospect. I don't think people aren't saying he's the best player in the country. They're saying put him out 5 years from now and he's the number one prospect, right? So how different is it, do you think, when you're from Ohio and you come in and you believe, like, the whole state is counting on you in a different way?
Well, I think there is a difference there. Just you talked about CJ coming in and maybe, Ohio State fans saying, who is this kid? Where's he from? California? It's different. You've been hearing about, Tavien for this whole time, since he was offered anyways. I think there might be a little bit more pressure from the fans, just because they're going to be excited. It's a homegrown kid. They've been watching him these last 3 years. They've seen him, going up the rankings. But personally, he's just, and you talked about having the right people around you, and that's where that comes down to. Hey, forget about all that. We got to continue to do what got you to this point, or what created all this hype around you, and you got to stay humble, and you got to just continue to work. Being from, I don't know if it'd be that much of a difference.
I think it's a weird dichotomy because I think the fans want you to succeed more if you're from Ohio, but they're also willing to destroy you faster if you're from Ohio and you don't make it right away.
They will destroy.
They're also more willing to be like, okay, this guy actually sucks. Let's play the guy from let's play the guy from Texas
that we don't know much about. Let's go play him. Yeah.
Well, that's a conversation for way down the road. We don't need to have that one now.
Yeah.
In the more immediate, Brad, you get the first scrimmage out of the way. You're still locked in the team hotel. Got the dog days of camp.
This is the worst week of camp right now.
What's it like to be in the midst of this right now?
This is where you've been in the camp hotel for a week now. Yesterday was just your family day, so you got to get out of jail,
read some air,
see your parents,
day, right?
Media day, family day, see your parents, see your team photos and stuff. So that was always a good day, and then Sunday night always sucks because you go in all right, now I got 6 days of just grueling. Oh, and then after the 6 days, school starts.
Yeah.
That was always that's the one that gets you. So this is the week this is where usually guys will either separate or fall away. What I think is good is that, I feel like we've had some veteran teams, but for some reason these guys, even if they're not true vets in terms of playing time, a lot of dudes seem just mature and more composed than in years past. Across the larger number of guys, it does seem like it's an older team that's more matured, ready to go. We haven't talked about the running backs. I think we talked about the quarterbacks, but I think having two of the top, if not the top 1 and 2 interchangeable backs in the country is going to be insanely helpful for the offense. Hopefully, Chip Kelly makes it useful and stuff, and that should take off some pressure of the quarterbacks, especially when you go to a game like Oregon. I think that's the one everyone's got circled, is use that. But, this week is going to be very interesting, and I'd assume they know who's going to be where at this point in the time going into the week. They won't tell us. And usually that's what the vibe is. Usually they know what's going on. So it is just the worst mental grind of a week though, because you've already been there. You're sick of the hotel. It sucks, but it's also the best week because you need to go through it before you get to the season.
Yeah, I do wonder how much the coaching staff or the guys in the locker room really feel is undetermined at this point. Jay-Z brought up feeling more comfortable with the offensive line. We don't know who's going to line up on August 31st at right guard. I do think pretty much everywhere else we do know. There's a lot of competition for maybe backup jobs or playing time or snaps, but from us on the outside, I wonder, is it really unclear, or do the Buckeyes really know what this looks like, even though it's just been 10 days and one scrimmage?
I think guys know, and usually in the locker room, you're around each other every day of the year. You have an idea of who can do what, and those 10 days or however long it's been, it's usually enough, especially by the time you get to the end of the week, guys know, so-and-so is going to be this. He'll probably be the backup and rotate in, but the 22 are probably pretty set, and then guys that are bubbles are going to be still playing.
Do you think that Sunday, family day, media day turns into parents want to talk to coaches and figure out where their kid is on the depth chart day?
In today's world, yes, and I can't stand it. I'm very anti.
I asked that because I know it happens.
Yeah.
So I think that there is an understanding that there is separation happening and there are roles being carved out. And so now you're
conversations are being had with parents.
Those conversations are happening yesterday. Hey, this, just so you know, this is the way it's going to look for your son this year. And so I think that, we saw LSU's backup tight end enter the transfer portal last week, right? We're how's that possible? Number one.
Announced his intentions.
Right. But school's about to start, so he's not going to play this year, and he's going to, but there are those conversations that are already starting. And so I wonder, for the guys that are getting a grasp of the pecking order, how much mentally, when you enter this week, you start to slip because you're screw this. I know I'm not going to be in this spot. So I think that probably makes these dog days even longer and more difficult because you're already know, okay, I'm third string here. So
that's where there's two types of guys. One guy's going to be darn, it's just not going to be it. And they're going to fall away. They're going to drop out of that 74-man or whatever the number is for the travel roster now. And that's also a big deal is that's probably more not this week, but next week before you get to game week. That travel roster is a big deal, especially for young guys. And there's always 4 guys that are bubble guys the week of that get decided on that Thursday practice. But this week and then next week, you can either be all right, well, I'm not going to be in that 2 deep, but then you lose sight of it and you're not even 3 anymore, you're 4, so now you're not traveling. Or you're you know what, hey, I'm not in that 2 deep, but I'm going to keep pushing. They're going to view you as that 2B, and then you're traveling. They're putting you on more special teams because they want you out there. So I think you can go 2 ways with it, and hopefully more guys choose the second option.
I think with the way of this team and the guys that came back, I think they're setting it up to where you're not going to be that other guy. We're pushing forward here. I don't care where you think you are or what's going on here. You're not on the team. We don't want you around here if you're going to be that way.
Sure.
And I think that veteran, those guys coming back and just wanting to really prove something has trickled down. I mean, you see these guys, you hear about it all the time. Bobby talks about how they don't have any fun. They don't do anything crazy like we used to do back in the day because they're just so laser focused. And I think that starts at the top and trickles down, and I expect to see none of that really coming out of these guys. And they recruit the guys that they know are going to be the ones that want to work hard and continue to go. And I don't think it could. I mean, I understand it can't happen.
Sure.
But I think the leadership and the team is takes care of that.
We've all seen the chippiness, the increased chippiness, and this roster in the last week already. In the practices we've seen, that comes from that focus. One more question about quarterbacks because I'm just permanently fascinated by quarterback mentality. How important was it for you as a young guy? This makes me think about Tavien St and Aaron Nolan and the travel roster because I don't think you're going to travel 5 quarterbacks to every road game because that would not make sense.
They definitely will not.
But there seems like there's 4 guys that have to travel every week because
you just don't know.
So, how do you balance? Do you think the coaches are trying to figure out? Okay, what we have, Will and Devin are definitely traveling, right? And then, if the belief is that Tavien St is the long-term quarterback, next quarterback, he almost has to travel every week. And then if if you're debating between do we take Lincoln or Air, like how do you not take the guy that's played in a bowl game in the event that you need an emergency quarterback, and then you have Air who could just never travel because like part of being a 5-star quarterback recruit is coming in and learning how to be a teammate and
going on the road and seeing things.
So I think it's kind of a weird conversation that they're going to have at some point. Like there was a huge deal, if you remember, in 2022 about Quinn Ewers and
designating him for to travel to Rutgers, was it?
Right, and that was like the only game he traveled to, right? So, and that was a part of the conversation of why he left. Like he didn't think he was getting all of the experience that he needed to get, even though he wasn't playing. So I just wonder how they are going to. How do you think
it's an interesting dynamic? I mean, my freshman year, I think they only traveled with Craig and Scott, and then a third. Yeah. You know, and it goes back to that where, all right, well, I'm here now. I'm not going to be playing this year. And then I get left off the travel team for the other quarterback to go. And it's just like, you know, that can send you down a hole for that weekend. Because it's just like, you know, you talked about being part of the travel squad. That's a cool, big deal. And then you start saying, all right, well, for me anyways, it's like, well, I need to know we're recruiting another quarterback. Yeah. It's Purdue, and I'm not even going to the Purdue game because they're taking Troy as the third quarterback.
Well, he could return kicks.
Well, not at that point in time he wasn't. We were both redshirted our freshman year. But it was a thing where they wanted to get you to go and show you different things. But that just goes back to the whole mindset. You have to, I mean, it can be hard because you want to be that guy on the travel squad. You know, you ask yourself, you're sitting at home watching the Purdue game on TV, like, man, what did I do to not, you know, what do I have to do better to be on this squad? Or, you know, but – you know, in those days, they didn't really tell us much about anything. So they just made decisions, and you just lived with it. But it's hard.
Good news is Ohio State only has to worry about that 4 times. So,
yeah, the bad news is 2 of those 4 are in the top 8 in the country as the first. As
well,
the
but that, I mean, those are big ones. That should make it easier to say, well, we're going to need all hands on deck. We cannot take 5 quarterbacks to Happy Valley or to Eugene. Like
I wouldn't be surprised if they – I mean, do you need 4?
That will be the
I'm saying that's the question. Like, how do you not take Julian if you believe that he's the long term?
Or how do you keep Lincoln at home and take him when he's the freshman? It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that for sure.
First world problems.
Yeah, I love 100%.
I love sports psychology 100%. And I love like the mentality of quarterbacks because I think it's the most interesting position in sports, and so like I'm always just endlessly curious about it.
Well, we should figure out what that pecking order starts to look like for Ohio State this week. That first scrimmage is in the bag. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles are scheduled to speak on Thursday, so should be some clarity coming soon. And maybe this conversation, a fun and casual one at Roosters, helps put it in perspective for Ohio State as well. We thank Nicole Cox and everyone at Roosters for having us in here. Thanks to Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. Appreciate Bradley Robinson and Justin Zwick for hanging out. I am Austin Warden. We'll be back in here in the Henderson Road location at least one more week, maybe several more. Come in and get some mac and cheese bites for $3 on Appetizer Thursday, and then come hang out with us next Monday if you want, right back in here. At Roosters, it's a fun, casual joint. We'll see you later.